Ahoy, how are you today? You got RC cars and stuff, or maybe you just bought your first one and you're thinking to yourself, I need some tools. These little tiny tools that came with the kit kind of suck, right? Well, let's get into what you need and just hold tight. Here we go.
2, 1.
Yum, 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 yum. Choo, choo. Boom. Hey, man, I like tacos. Hey, let's go to work. Chop, chop. Good haggis. You bought your first RC car, or maybe you've been around a while and you've just been kind of, slumming about with the stock tools that came with the kit. They'll get you by, and that is true. However, the problem you're going to run into on a regular basis is the fact that a lot of those tools, they just aren't going to cut it. I'm going to tell you why as we go through the process. But, a lot of times you'll see tools like this little thing here, right? They call it a four-way. I think Tamiya kind of coined it. It's something that you see all the time in various RC car kits. It's actually really handy, but unless you're building a Tamiya RC car, most of the time you're going to run into the hardware is hex, right? It's hex keyed. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that history. A while back, a lot of the cars had one or two choices of hardware, either metric or imperial. And there was a shift a while back, probably about 2 decades, where almost everything became metric. There was a couple manufacturers that still kind of held on to, some of the imperial stuff, and then they eventually, said, okay, yeah, we'll switch everything to metric. So by and large, when I'm referring to the Allens or the Hex drivers, in some case, we'll call them, they're going to be metric. So real quick, you've probably seen stuff like this, maybe even in your toolkit. This is actually a little bit big, and this one here is actually imperial because it's a 3/16. I think it's written down there, and of course you've seen that, like this style. It's very common. This has got little ball ends on them. This is also imperial. And then here's another style that you'll see sometimes at the hardware store. Just a basic Allen set, right? And you kind of think like, oh, that should be perfect for my RC car, when in reality, unfortunately, you're wrong. And the reason why I say that is because normally the hardware that is on your RC car, Traxxas, Team Associated, the big companies, right? The hardness of the screw itself is on a scale that normally these black oxide style drivers are just not going to cut it. And in fact, they'll end up stripping out your screws quite often, even the ones that come in a kit. And it sucks, right? Because you have this nice, cool RC car, and you're sitting there going, so what do I do? What are my choices? And then you go to the hobby shop back, maybe where you bought the RC car, or even the website, and you see some tools and you're just like, holy mackerel, those are expensive, right? Like you're sitting there going to yourself, I didn't know it was going to be that much. But a lot of times the tools you end up buying will last quite a while. I have some examples here. I'm going to show you some stuff I've had for almost 2 decades. Then I'm going to show you some stuff that I have that's new. What do you need? I have a ton of accoutrement, we'll call it, that I use on a regular basis. And when you're getting started, normally, let's just talk about the basics, right? So a lot of times, if you're doing 10th scale, like it'll have something like this. And then you can remove the wheel nuts with this guy, right? And then you might have a different screw where you might need this because maybe it's got the screw's kind of long and has a nut on the other side, like shocks sometimes will have that. So keeping this around is still going to be handy. So just remember that, like, don't throw this thing away because you don't have a replacement yet. Okay. Sometimes some kits will come with something like this. Kyosho gives you one of these. And by the way, it has several, like you'll see it several times. This one says Huddy. These are just kind of like this thing, right? essentially it's numbered 7, 5.5, 4 mil, 3 mil, 5 millimeter. When you see those numbers, they're metric. So that's just the size of the nut that you can usually slip it over and hold it. So if you have these, hold on to them because they are important. And speaking of nuts, as I bump my camera, a lot of times if I have a hard to reach place, instead of using one of these, I actually use one of these. And here's the reason why, is because this will reach down further. I can apply pressure to it and the nut won't slip off while I'm on the other side with my hex driver, which I'm going to show you here in a second, as I'm inserting the screw into the nut. And I like to use these, and sometimes you can put a rubber band around it to help sort of hold it in place. And say like you just need to lay it there on the RC car, you can kind of just have it being held there in place, because maybe you're fidgeting around and you don't have 14 hands, you just got 2, or maybe you just got 1. I don't know what your situation's like, but being resourceful with the stuff you have laying around, like this is just a Harbor Freight special. There's nothing special about this guy. And I primarily just use it for real basic stuff. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the nut itself. I'm literally just trying to hold it with some force while I'm having it in my hand. Okay. So having one of these is good. So just a pair of needle nose pliers. All right. So before we get into some more of the random stuff that I use on a regular basis, let's just go ahead and talk about the different styles of Allens that are out there that you might see. And you're going to see here, I'm putting out the driver style, right? This looks like it goes inside something. It doesn't even have a handle, right? I'm going to show you why I use these. I have a whole bunch here. I have some Traxxas ones, some MIP ones. The MIP will just literally be labeled, MIP. And a lot of times MIP will have like a little sticker with some heat shrink that you'll slide over it. Like 1.5. You'll notice that this one is striped. And this one says 2 mil. The striped ones, MIP does that so at a quick glance, it's like those are solid. Like here that says 2.5, 1.5. This says 2 mil. And then, sorry, there's a little bit of a glare. That says 2 mil and 3 mil. But these have a stripe sticker. That's because these have ball ends on them, as you can see there. So we'll talk the reason why you might want a ball end later. And then, of course, these are straight itself. If you're a fan of cool stories, check out MIP. The dude, started out just like you and me and just liked RC, and he wanted to create a better tool. And so he's been making these in the good old USA since like the early 80s or something like that. I may be getting the story a little bit misrepresented, but it's still a real story. So yeah, check out MIP's story. I would. It's pretty neat. So these are Traxxas. Actually, that's an MIP one there. This is a Traxxas one. They're actually pretty good as well. So I would not say that they're not. I've actually had really good luck with these. This one's actually going on like 7 years old, and I still use it. Still has a really good edge on it. And then you'll notice here I have a couple of nut driver style, one for smaller and one for like basic wheel nuts, like 10th scale wheel nuts. And I'll get into the differences here in a minute. And why do I have these? Because I use one of two things. I use either this guy or this guy. This has got a ratchet on here, and then you can lock it. So if I pop like this in like that and I twist it, you can kind of see what I did there. This is a Milwaukee piece. It'll ratchet, make my life a little easier. Okay. The problem you have with a large handle like this is you can apply a lot of torque with the bigger handle. So you kind of need to learn a little bit of finesse, especially when you're working on small items. Like a 2 millimeter screw doesn't need a gorilla to put it in or out. You just need the right tool. And then what I mean by the proper torque, so instead of like just trying to just beef it up and like I'm gonna just hold this thing so tight, my forearms like flaring out like all crazy, like just like hold it loosely. You don't need to crank on it. Going back to, again, the reason why The major reason is these things are really hard. Like the hardness on these are, it's pretty high. And they're precision tip, meaning that they aren't like cast, essentially, out of a mass production sort of scenario. The tip itself is machined perfectly to fit into that screw itself that you're trying to get a hold of. That's just important when you start working on stuff. Actually, I'm going to show you something here. Cool thing about magic of editing, I don't have to pause. All right, so if you have like random screws, right? It's going to look in this little box here, and you'll notice that it fits on there perfectly. It kind of falls off. But if I did something here to kind of help improve that, another little secret weapon that I have is this little thing here, a magnetizer and demagnetizer. So what I'll do is I'll put that in here, and then I'll set that dude in here, and I'll just rotate it, and the magnetizer, now it'll pick the screw up, right? So you have to do that periodically. It doesn't always hold its magnetism. So now when I hold it, as you can see, it doesn't fall off. Now you're saying, hey Chris, why do you have that big old DeWalt impact drill? Well, it's not the big one. It's the small one. It's a 12 volt. I don't like their screwdriver. They have some weird screwdriver that's like a gyro operated thing. And the first time I ever used it, it made me so mad. I was like, okay, cool idea, poor execution. Here's the reason why I use this. You see that little setting right there? And when I hit it, it'll like change itself. So high, low, and that first setting is kind of, sorry about the glare there. You see that first setting? It looks like it has like a little star-shaped screw on there. It's yellow. That first setting right there, that's for putting in lightweight screws and stuff. I've had really good success with it. Have I ever stripped anything with it? Probably. I may not have noticed, but I'm real careful about when I'm using this tool, because if I'm building like a whole bunch of stuff, like I used to do a ton of repairs, I needed my life to be a little faster than using this guy here. Okay. And the reason why I like it, that setting, it's got an auto torque setting that it'll notice, like if it feels too much torque, it'll just stop. It's the 12 volt brushless, remember 12 volt brushless DeWalt, and it has a like I said, a screwdriver setting on it itself. So just remember that if you're looking for a good tool. I don't know what these go for, but I've seen them like at trade flea markets and stuff like that. I want to say for like $60. You'll need the 12 volt battery for it, which has the battery life indicator on there. I don't even know, is that going to work? Yeah, you have to hold it down. The 20 volt battery charger will charge this as well. You'll notice that if you have the 20 volt setup and you already have that charger, then and if you just happen to find one of these used or maybe second hand, sometimes you'll find people will buy the clearance sort of liquidated product sales at your random flea market. Sometimes we question how do they get it, but look, it's pretty much going to be like a liquidation type of thing where it may not have the battery, or if it does have the battery, it may not have the charger. You get the idea. So if you have a 20 volt charger, it'll still charge the 12 volt battery itself. We have the hexes with the speed bits, or we'll call them the speed attachment, right? And we've got a handle, but you're like, well, what if maybe my hobby shop doesn't have those, or maybe I don't like those? Well, that's okay. You don't have to like them. That's not a big deal. There's another way to do it, and that's just to have these precision tip Allens or hex drivers or hexes or whatever you want to call them. There's another way to go about your business, and that's just getting them with their own handle. Here's MIP. Here's a 1.3. I use this on my baby crawler, my little SCX 24, because a lot of times you'll need it. It's a little tiny dude, got some fuzz on it. So yeah, it has this little handle on there, and it works good. So MIP sells a whole bunch of those. The handle does work very well. The major complaint that I hear about these handles, though, is when your hands get a little sweaty or greasy, they get a little slippery. So, just kind of think about that. If you're working on stuff all the time, just the natural oil from your hand, like these start to get a little slippery. So, another good tool. All right. Here's an old school dynamite. I've had this thing it's an 050. I've had this thing for, geez, I don't know, like since like the early 2000s, like 2001 or something. Dynamite. I think that Tower Hobbies brand maybe or something back in the day. These are cool because, they have that gnarled edge, but then it's got a little flat spot. So it may not roll off the counter as easily. The hands get sweaty, that gnarled edge. It kind of doesn't matter. You can always have a good grip on it. Do you need small flat blade or Phillips screwdrivers? Periodically, yeah. And I still like to use precision tips for those too. So I have some small ones here. They're a little dirty. They see action, but they're lightweight. I got these actually, I'm pretty sure, I think they have a name on there. Yeah, they say Pittsburgh. They're kind of like, I think these are electrical rated. I don't know. These are good for small application stuff. Like sometimes if you're working on toys or you have other projects, go ahead and invest into some smaller, flat blade, precision. I mean, they're fairly good. Now, are they as good as like precision tip Allen? No, but by and large, a flat blade screw or a star shape or Phillips screw, it's not going to be in whatever it's in as hard as maybe an Allen screw might be. And the reason why is the plastics are usually a little different when those screws are applied. Just kind of something to think about, especially if you're using Tamiya. Tamiya uses a sharp, I think PH2 or a sharp number 2. It has a real pronounced point on the screw itself. And I don't have one of those, but if you are building a Tamiya kit, just remember that they actually make a specialized like Phillips screwdriver for their stuff. And I have found through my travels, and I actually have one here. Let me pull that out. You can, I'm dropping stuff. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, like that. This one actually works pretty good. I've used it on Tamiya stuff. It's the tip's kind of worn, but it's a Makita. I've actually used it on some Tamiya screws. It works pretty well, actually. And even it's just got a speed attachment. Oh, there's still another style here. Hold on. So here's some other styles of Allens. These are pretty common these days. You're going to see a ton of companies with this style. And you'll notice that the bit can be like changed out, like if it ever wears out. These are still precision. And these handles are like really light. They're hollow on the inside. Sometimes you'll see them with like a little rotating head. So that way, if it's in your hand and you're turning it, it'll rotate easily. And the reason why these are so popular is because a bunch of companies have started like outsourcing like their own brand screwdriver. So I'm going to tell you a little secret about the hobby industry. The hobby industry, by and large, when it comes to accessories and screws, and we'll get into bearings in another video. When it comes to those products, these are all the same. So like, I'm just going to show you an example. This is a Racer's Edge nut driver. Okay. HRP distributes these. You see how that has a little cap on there I was telling you about? So HRP distributes these, right? HRP also distributes these, but you'll notice that it's blank on that side. You see it? Well, guess what? The same company that makes this makes this, and it's not HRP or Racer's Edge. It's literally just a dude in China in a factory, and there's probably a dozen of these factories, but they're all making the same stuff. And they're making them for most of the companies that you see listed in your hobby shop. So what I mean by that is you're going to end up seeing like this style of screwdriver or this style of screwdriver like over and over and over again in different shades of colors and different slightly configurations, or maybe they're skeleton looking because they wanted a different handle, or maybe the handle doesn't have a gnarled edge on it and it's kind of smoothed and polished or something. They're all the same. And the reason why I say this is because if you go to AliExpress, not Alibaba, the wholesale side of things, but AliExpress, you'll see these all over the place. And they are dirt cheap. I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from the hobby shop, but by the time you buy this or this has gone through. So somebody here in the US has said, yeah, I want to sell that and I want my name on it. Okay. So they laser etch the name on it. And this is probably way off in the weeds, but I'm telling you this because hobbies can be expensive and I don't want them to be that way for you. I want them to be budget friendly if they can be, but you still have the best tools possible. So somebody in the US said, hey, I want to sell that and I want to put my name on it and I want to mark it up and I'll have my own special packaging. And they're just technically white labeling something they never created. They didn't design this. Okay, does that make sense? Because this is the same thing. It literally is the same thing. I just showed it to you. I mean, you can see it right here. They vary a tiny bit because maybe the edges are, one's a little deeper than the other or something like that. But when it comes to this part here, this is what you care about the most, right? Is how good is this? And this is good. I can assure you. This is high strength steel. And that's the name that you usually sometimes, hear about. Is this going to work? And it will. Well, can it strip? Yeah, I mean, anything can strip or wear, but by and large, I mean, this tip here is almost perfect. And I say that because, again, you can get these like cheap. Like you go to the hobby shop, you're going to spend 30, 40, 50 bucks on a set of 4 of these. Just go look and see what a set of these basic Allen drivers are on AliExpress. And this is the same thing. I'm telling you. Now, I'm not talking about MIP. MIP are made in the USA and that they make dope stuff. So it's I'm not really comparing them to that. But if you're on a budget, then have at it. Because if you're worried about buying in the United States from your local hobby dealer, I'm not saying that your hobby dealer doesn't need support, but you're kind of shorting your pocketbook a little bit because these are not any better or any worse than what you're getting at your average hobby shop, I can assure you. All right, so enough about that. So these are good. By the way, the Racer's Edge, these are just some basic, set of nut drivers, we'll call them. Okay, so those are out of the way. We got those done. Enough about that. I like to have a pick like this. And the reason why is because you'll notice that when you drive your RC car around inside the Allen head itself, dirt can accumulate and then your Allens don't work, right? They won't even fit in there. So this is where this is kind of helpful. I'll spray like a little WD-40 on it and then I'll just kind of pick at it and then the dirt just falls away. And then you use some compressed air. Maybe you have an air compressor itself and just blow the dirt out of the head of the Allen screw. Okay, what else can I show you? Well, so some other stuff, moving on. So we kind of talk about the basics, right? We said, hey, what are some other things I could use? Well, Lexan scissors are great because they cut the body of your RC car. This is a curved one, and then this is a straight one, right? You notice that I am a little selective on these. These are Dubro, made in Taiwan. The steel on these, they stay fairly sharp for a long time. And the reason why I have these, you're like going, well, I'm not painting car bodies yet. That's okay. You'll find that if you trim the body up sometimes on your basher, just a little bit, there's like certain spots, and we might get into in another episode maybe somewhere, but if you trim the RC body up a little bit in certain areas, like usually around the bumpers, they have a tendency not to like get cracked as fast. you know, or maybe you need to trim out the wheel wells a little bit or something like that because maybe the tires are rubbing. It's a good thing to have. Speaking of Lexan cutting stuff, body reamer. I also have one of these on standby because if I do want to start doing my own RC bodies, they may not have the holes like ready to go. You know what this is really good for though, I have found? And this thing is super sharp, guys. Like you got to be really careful. That edge, I mean, this edge right here, it'll mess you. I've sliced my finger bad one time. I wasn't paying attention. So be careful when you're using a body reamer. So same thing with the body reamers and the Allen drivers, or the Hex drivers, is nobody is really making these special that I have found. If there's somebody in the US that's making these in-house, I would love to know. But this one here is like a Racer's Edge-esque version, we'll call it. And a ton of companies make these. You'll find them all over AliExpress. So just remember that. And the reason why I'm showing you this is if you want to go buy a light kit and you want to install it, this is your easiest way to install a light kit because you have to make little tiny holes. So you'll just kind of start making a hole with this until it meets the size of the little bulb that you want to stick into the body. And then this is the best way to do it. Other than like a big drill, right? And it's actually a little faster because like sometimes you try to use a drill and you got to go find the drill and what size drill bit am I going to use, and then it doesn't always fit, and I got to go get another drill bit, and it's just a nightmare. So get a body reamer if you're going to start customizing stuff. Okay, so that kind of covers a lot of things. Specialty tool here. This is just a bearing sizer. And you'll notice here that it has like little numbers on it. And that'll tell you the inside diameter of the bearing. And that's important if you have a bunch of bearings that have been cratered, or maybe your car's been hammered and you need to know what size bearing it is. This is helpful to at least get the inside diameter. Plus, it's also helpful pushing bearings out, like especially in like hubs. Like I'll get in there and push the inside one at an angle, and then it'll kind of pop out, and then once I get it out, I can go back through. I can flip it around and go through the other side of the hub carrier or the bearing carrier. A lot of times, like that's the piece that's where the axle kind of rides next to the wheel, and then I'll pop the other bearing out. It just makes life a little easier having one of those. Some other specialty tools that I'll end up having is like a little wire brush. Sometimes I'll have a plastic one too, but I like using these around areas that have got a lot of cake up, like around plastic in a corner or something where a screw might be, and I just need to get like a little extra dirt out of the way. I have these tweezers here that will hold stuff. So say like sometimes I'm working on something random and you might need to hold it with something. Caliper. This is a little baby caliper that I like to use periodically. If you just need to measure something. I do have a real nice digital caliper that's real precise, and I'll use it for just measuring stuff real fast. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because if you need to measure the outside of a bearing, then you can go, oh, okay, so that's, what size is that, And you're just like, oh, that's I don't know, what size is this guy? It's a 15, 16. Outside diameter 16, right? And then you're like, well, what's the inside diameter? Looks like it's, I don't know, 7 or 8. And you're like, well, I don't know. Let's double check on this guy. Oh, it's an 8. It fit on the number 8 section between 6 and 10. Notice it says 8. So, that was right. It was an 8, internal 8, outside 16. And then you're like, well, what's the width? Oh, well, it's a 5. Oh, okay. So now I know what size bearing I need. There you go. Easy. Problem solved. Because a lot of times you're trying to look up bearings. Maybe you don't have a hobby shop near you. You need to order bearings. Having a little caliper, man, it just makes life easier. And sometimes they're so small that a caliper won't work. That's why I have 2. So, because the inside diameter you may not be able to measure with your caliper. Okay, so those are some basics. Magnetic trays, I mean, they make life easy. I have like, this is a magnet here from O'Reilly's. This is a magnet. It's like a little sticker that goes in this aluminum tray. Hold stuff like, it may not, like this is an aluminum. Um, Maybe there's a little metal in there. But it'll hold your bearings and your body clips and stuff. And, it kind of helps keep up with stuff. I usually have multiples of these because I have multiple projects going on anytime. And that kind of goes into some other basic stuff. So, like, if you have an Arrma car, don't throw this away. It looks like a little pistol. It's kind of weird looking. Because it's an Allen, it's a Hex. Oh my gosh, it's a nut driver holder thing. I don't know what you call it. Anyway, it'll hold the nuts on the car, and just kind of help you out with some various stuff. This is real, interesting. I haven't used this one that much. Let's just say that. Okay. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I haven't used it a whole lot. All right. I keep bumping my mic with my hat. All right. So this guy here, what is this? Well, I use it because, I have sometimes you'll need one of these things, right? And then you're like, oh, what? I can put that on there, and then I can put that on there. You see what I'm doing? So I do this. I'll take one of these guys off. Now I have a nice little nut driver. God, yeah, nut driver. But it's on a screwdriver, electric screwdriver. Or I can switch it, and I can put it on my handle. That's a 1/4 inch, so I'll have one for 3/8 as well. And the reason why I do that, for you big guys, for you guys that are running the 1/8 scale or bigger, you'll have like 17 mil wheel hubs or larger, like you have X Max or larger. I'll use the 3/8 adapter, like I'm using the 1/4 inch here, and then I'll put it on my impact, and that makes life a lot easier. I'll screw it on by hand first, then I'll drive it in, but it makes life way easier. Okay, so just remember that. So what are some other things that I use on a regular basis? I want to show you one little tip. Oh, here it is. I couldn't find it. You're like, that's tire glue, Chris. I'm like, yeah, but it's got a special ingredient. Does it say it right there? It's kind of hard to read. You see how it says right above IC 2000 carbon and rubber toughened. So you notice it's dark, the glue. If you have a screw that's stripped out, like on your control arm or something like that, and it's just not holding very well anymore, and the control arm's perfect, man, put this in the hole. Put the screw in, let it set up like overnight, and then now you've made new threads, and that screw is probably not going to back out. It's not permanently in there, but it'll make new thread, I promise. And it does a great job because it's going to bond to the plastic. It's still somewhat flexible when you need it to be. It's great tire glue, by the way. This is my preferred tire glue for just like bashing and stuff like that. And it's made by Bob Smith Industries. You can find it all over the place. This one says Stevens International on it because that's where I buy it from. And Stevens doesn't really sell to the public. But a lot of hobby shops will have Bob Smith glue itself. Anyway, great stuff for repairs. So remember that. What else do I have? I have a good old Dremel. Sometimes you gotta, break stuff and get it off. So I'll use like one of these to like grind the head off of a screw. Because maybe it's just too far gone. It's stripped, right? So you've tried the best Allens, doesn't work. So grind the tip off and then usually free up the part, and the screw will still be kind of left there. A lot of times that might happen, I'm trying to think of an example. Shock tower or something like that. You just can't get to it. Allen is stripped or bent or something, so you just kind of play it by ear. I'm not saying that this tool can be also a pain in the butt if you're not using it properly. So just be careful if you're using a Dremel. Tidying up your workspace, that's kind of up to people. I have like different holders for stuff. Like I have this little toolkit here. It just kind of holds everything. Or tool, it's not even really a tool caddy. Racer's Edge put their name on this one. However, this is also on AliExpress with no name on it. So, just kind of think about that when you're kind of perusing around, looking for cool stuff for your workshop. So, what else do I have? I have one little extra tool I'm going to show you. By the way, cigar boxes make great storage devices. I don't smoke cigars or anything like that, but a lot of times cigar shops will give away cigar boxes, or they'll be like, oh, it's $1, So, what do I have here? I have my little box full of crimpers and like a little stripper. And the reason why I have it is because, you've seen this before, right? It's like a little servo lead. Well, what if you want to make some lights or something, right? But you want them to plug into maybe the radio, or you want to bridge a connection in. This is the last thing I wanted to show you. This is not a necessary tool, but what this crimper does is allows me to make the little connections and crimp. So what I did is I wanted to show you how it crimps it like really nicely on that one. You see how those are like all butterflied open, and this one got crimped. I wasted one to show you. And then what you do is you just make your own connections. You go buy a bag of these or something, and you're like, I need, male and female or something like that. The female ones just look like a tube, essentially. Might be almost out of those. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, it looks like I might be out of the receiver style. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that real quick. It's not a necessity, If you got a buddy or something like that that's really into doing the electronic stuff, use them. If you want to practice, man, I'm all about learning something new. The last thing that you can't probably do without is a good, just what I call like a hobby knife. Sharp edge. This has got the titanium coated edge on it, so it's sharp but tough. Because I'll end up cutting on, like a piece of plastic or something like that, or I'm trying to cut something out, or I'm stripping a wire. This is real handy for that. And that's kind of about it. I mean, I've got more stuff. I've got, airbrush machine, and I've got a soldering iron, but at the end of the day, all you really need is some good precision tip Allens or hexes, if you want to call them. You can get them in handle form like this, right? Or you can try to use this like what came with your RC car kit and keep having a lot of pain. The choice is yours, but normally what I used to tell people in the store is a good set of tools will pay for about an hour of labor for somebody else doing it for you. And, then you have the tools forever, right? Or theoretically, as long as you keep up with them or how often you use them. So the tools to me are definitely worth it. Plus, you get to kind of work on your own stuff. I know it can be intimidating, but don't let it be intimidating. Just do the best you can. If you end up having questions, just send us a message and chat. We'll do our best to respond because we're here for you. So hopefully this was a little helpful today. I may not have covered everything. There may be some cool gadgets out there that people like. Look, there's always going to be something for somebody. I didn't even talk about shock holders, or like rebuilding shocks and stuff like that. That's a totally different story. There's like, you can get into the weeds and the details of stuff like a pinion gear puller. I didn't even talk about that. I have one of those. Look, start with the basics, start with the Allens. the Allen keys or the hex keys. I keep calling them Allen keys, hex drivers, hex keys, because that's going to make your life way easier immediately. Especially if you got a control arm, you just need to swap it out. You don't need somebody else to help you with that. You just need to do it yourself. Facts, right? All right. Well, that's it for today. Hopefully you found this helpful, and we'll chat later. Don't forget, Tuesday through Thursday, 11 a.m. Hit the notification bell because we do a live stream. We'll try like out new hobbies and stuff and bring them to you. Sometimes there'll be models or painting or crafty stuff or RC related. That's our kind of general sort of topic stuff. But the deep dive stuff we'll kind of continue to bring to you. So it'll sit there forever like this. What tools do you need on a regular basis to work on your RC car? Stay cosmic and have an awesome day.